Welcome to Planning and Beyond, the podcast where financial planning meets human understanding. I'm your host, Ashley Kwame, and today our special guest is Dr. Jenny Olson, assistant professor at Indiana University. Jenny is remarkable in the sense that she studies something that I love to talk about. And her research focuses on this, amongst other things too, and that is couples. Shocker. I know. For those of you that know me, you know I love talking couples there. And today, actually, Jenny and I are going to get into something a little bit more specific within the couples realm, something that's not really talked about and really not even researched a whole lot about. And that is financial infidelity. But before we get in, Jenny, I want to say hi. Thank you. Welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here.
Yay, thank you. And like you, Ashley, I love talking about couples. So this will be a fun conversation. I really look forward to it.
Yeah. And, you know, what I say for a lot of the guests that come on here, it'll probably be too short as well. We won't be able to get to everything, unfortunately, but that just means you'll have to come back on later time and date. So I know that I just kind of dropped a bomb in saying that we're going to talk about financial infidelity. And there may be some advisors who are listening and thinking, my goodness, like that sounds scandalous. And maybe not even something that applies to me. Like, why are we talking about financial infidelity? What is it? Can we start maybe just high level, Jenny? Like, what are we talking about when we say financial infidelity?
So the cleanest definition is something my co-authors and I developed in a paper a couple years ago, and we define financial infidelity as intentionally engaging in financial behaviors that you expect will be disapproved of by your romantic partner, and then subsequently concealing them. So importantly, there's really two components to that definition. There's an act and then there's subsequent concealment. And when you have those two things together, that's how we conceptualize financial infidelity.
Yeah, yeah. When I first, I remember some early conversations several years ago and talking about financial infidelity. And there were some misconceptions around what it was. Like, you know, it involves an affair, you know, with somebody else and spending money on somebody else. And so I love that you and your colleagues have defined this pretty explicitly here. Can you maybe just give briefly, like, some examples, like common examples that maybe you guys see around how it plays out with couples?
I think it got a little bit right there. But so, in terms of some common examples of financial infidelity, there's a lot of different domains. And so, we identify around 6 different domains, but I would say the biggest one is hidden spending. So, it's spending maybe more than you think your partner's going to like approve of, and then you're hiding it. So it's spending on extra things on Amazon, for example, and you hide the evidence. You know, I've got shoe boxes in my own closet. And so, we kind of do all these things. It's also concealing income. Like if you get an unexpected bonus at work and then you don't let your partner know about that. It's things like maybe splurging on a lot of gifts for family without your partner knowing about it. And it's not just spending, it can also be things like saving. So if you are secretly saving money to pay down debts and things, like on the surface, that might seem like a moral and virtuous activity, but at the same time, it implies a certain degree of distrust. Like if you're not telling your partner this, like what else is going on, right? And I've heard lots of examples, over the years in studying this, and those are some kind of the big ones, I would say.
Yeah, the saving one is particularly interesting to me, and I um, have worked with a few couples. One comes to mind where they were not in agreement around how much to be saving to put in their retirement accounts. And the husband wanted to save, a lot, let's just say a lot more. A lot more. But there was this pretty common tension between we have kids, we're in a quote busy phase of life. We should enjoy some of this. We shouldn't put all of this. And the husband, very, very, very vigilant around savings. To your point, like he was saving behind his wife's back. And it came out, in a meeting that the wife was, she was very upset. Let's just say very, very upset. But it was hard because, as you said, it seemed virtuous, right? It seemed like, but we're saving and I'm doing this for our future. But there was this like feeling of betrayal almost.
Well, why aren't you telling me this? Why aren't you there's opportunity costs, right? Like that money could be used for other things. And, if we're in this together as a team, we both should be involved in those discussions and have a certain amount of transparency. And financial infidelity directly violates transparency.
It does. Yeah, that's a great way to frame that there. Okay, so you've given a few just common examples there. Is there anything around just high level kind of financial infidelity, things that it's not? I mentioned like affair, people think that it's involved in like sexual affairs, and certainly there can be a component there. Don't get me wrong. But like, are there any myths out there that are worth dispelling around what financial fidelity is or isn't?
Yeah, one thing that comes to mind that it is not is it's not just general secrecy. So, for example, this is something, I mean, hopefully my husband Nathan's not listening, but sometimes we like secretly watch extra episodes on Netflix without
Yes.
telling each other.
I won't tell if you don't tell. I
Our
definitely
secrets
do
are
that.
safe with here, safe space. But like that, general secrecy, or if I go and, eat extra Oreos or something and not telling my partner, if I'm like eating extra desserts or something without telling my partner, we don't conceptualize general secrecy in terms of financial infidelity. And the reason is because the resources have to be interdependent, right? Finances are interdependent. Whatever you do directly affects me, right? And so when I am secretly saving or spending, it impacts our ability to make decisions together in the future. Whereas me, eating a few extra Oreos at lunch it doesn't impact my partner's weight per se, and so there's not like those direct costs. And so we really think that it has to require that interdependence, which is another reason why, at least in all of the work we study, we really focus on marital relationships, because there's also that legal piece to it. So with cohabitating, yes, there's also a degree of interdependence, but it's not legal in a sense, right? Or sometimes people ask us, well, what about parent-child relationships? I think there could be some financial infidelity, like if a parent is spending an inheritance down, but then there's also these power dynamics of like, yeah, but it's their, like, you know what I mean? It gets a little complicated. And so we really believe that it has to happen in the context of interdependent relationships, which involve money and not
Yeah.
just like any other resource like food and things.
Yeah. And I'm curious, like in terms of like from a research and even definition place, I would imagine, and I'm guilty of this too. I have purchased things where, no, I have not told Clayton about it. Now, granted, he can see our credit cards because everything we have is shared. So I don't know how secret or transparent it is because he sees everything. But anyway, there is the like, I have
Right.
not shared this information. And I'm just wondering if like single acts of lack of transparency, if that falls under financial infidelity. Is it more of like a pattern, like behavior?
Yeah, that's a good question. It can be individual acts, but the way that we at least have studied it in our work is more as an individual level propensity.
Okay.
Like some people are just more likely to do this. That said, we all kind of have a base rate of it, and even one big act could be a big, actually my favorite example of this is, I think SNL had a spoof where they show a guy surprise his wife on Christmas with a new car. And then she's like, what are you doing? And he expected like all this excitement, right? And so it could be that single act, and then you find out about it. And then that's where that friction comes in. But not all single acts, right? So like to your example, do you expect, I think you said Clayton, do you expect him to disapprove of it, your spending? And if
Yeah, it would
not,
depend.
then it
If I
may,
brought a car home, Jenny, then yes,
right? Right.
for sure.
But whereas like if, and again, my own situation, like I buy like new clothes a lot, but I don't necessarily expect my partner to disapprove of it, but I still kind of hide it. So if I just conceal, but I don't think he's going to care,
Yeah.
then it's not financial infidelity.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
So
a
it
great,
really needs both pieces. So that's
yeah.
that actually a good example of that is gifting. So if I'm buying my partner a birthday gift and we've set a spending threshold, like right, the amount of money that we can spend without discussing it, but I'm hiding it. Yes, I've achieved concealment, but I don't expect my partner to disapprove because it's for a birthday and it's within our agreed upon budget. And so you really got to have those two pieces. And so, yes, kind of circling back to the question, A single act can represent financial infidelity, but it's also this individual level propensity. Some people are just more likely to do it.
Yeah. Well, and I think the distinction there too around having both the concealment
Right.
and the disapprovement is also really important
Yes, absolutely.
too to keep in mind. And I would imagine, I don't know if advisors listening to this right now, if they're like, oh yeah, I've certainly heard of like discussions that come up and one partner is not approving of it, even, if the amount seems frivolous or what have, right? Yes, there is a level of disapprovement and maybe even concealment as well. Okay, so let's get a little bit maybe more granular here in talking about some of your latest research. And that being on financial infidelity and the impact of like the couple and like their well-being. And in that research, like you talked about financial infidelity asymmetry. We have kind of this nice beautiful definition of what financial infidelity is. What is financial infidelity asymmetry as it relates to couples?
Besides a mouthful, like saying that's always like, every
Yeah.
time I talk about this work, I'm like, financial infidelity asymmetry. So how we define that is it's the degree to which two partners differ or diverge in the degree to which they're likely to engage in financial infidelity. So, in other
Ooh.
words, we all have, kind of like we were saying, we all have these individual propensities. How different are we? Just like your partner might be relatively more introverted and you're extroverted, like the degree of difference, right? So, it's the degree to which you differ in your likelihood of engaging in financial.
Okay. All right. And so I'm curious because I think that is really interesting. What did you guys find there? What were some of the findings as it related to who is more likely to engage?
Yeah, so what we did is we looked at financial infidelity as a couple level phenomenon. So we were somewhat agnostic to the identity of like which partner is more likely than the other in a relationship because
Okay.
we do find that there are differences. Like on average, most couples do differ. Or I should say, most partners within a couple do differ to some extent. And what we find is that couples where there's greater divergence, like, so the more different we are in this propensity, it actually lower assets. Like you have less money in your bank account. We had real bank account data. You are less happy with your financial well-being. So you're not happy with how you're saving. You're not happy with how you're spending together as a team. And then third, you also express lower relationship satisfaction. Like you're just not happy. Yeah. And what was interesting too is we thought, well, is it possible that divergence in any sort of trait predicts the same, negative outcomes? Like, so if we're just more different in extroversion, if we're more different in goal commitment, if we're more different in all these other things, and we find that financial infidelity proneness. So this financial infidelity asymmetry is the stronger, most consistent predictor of those outcomes in those three domains. In part, what we think is going on is that when you are more discrepant in this tendency, you have less unified financial goals. Right? You're just not on the same like level. Like if you're not talking, you're not communicating, it's a lot more hard, a lot more difficult to kind of create a central image of what this partnership is going to be. And then that's
Mm.
what causes that down.
Okay. All right. So, what I'm hearing right from you is that this asymmetry piece is, from a predictive standpoint, really impacts not just how satisfied they feel like as a couple, but also assets too, like bank account information. Okay. So, let's pull back a little bit, and I'm thinking about like our listeners right now, and maybe there's a couple like that kind of comes to mind there, and they're hearing some of the things that you're saying, and they're like, gosh, that couple, it's really been just kind of a struggle here recently. And, they don't have as much as maybe what they quote unquote should have. They're certainly not on the same page with some of these goals, or there's just these things that crop up and it's this tension kind of friction like point there. What are maybe just some other like flags, red flags, pink flags, blue flags? I don't know what the color is, but what are just maybe some other like flags, everything, given everything that you just shared, like that advisors might want to be on the lookout for when it comes to signs of whether it's financial infidelity, asymmetry, or just financial infidelity more broadly?
Yeah, so we have not delved into specific examples per se, but I would say just from our own observations and our own work is that it's things like when one partner is dominating the conversation,
Okay.
it implies that they have greater access to the information, which could mean an asymmetry. Lack of transparency, I think, is the big one. So when both partners are maybe expressing their goals or their hopes for their portfolio, whatever it may be, and there's disagreement. Like, wait a minute, you didn't say that before. It implies that there's not communication.
Mm,
I think communication is at the heart of all of this. And actually, my father in law is a retired financial advisor, and he often talked about this where you'd see a couple and one person's doing all the talking and you're like, what's going on here, right? And so that you get into like these power differentials and all these different things, and it could be that one partner is just not aware of what the other is doing. One thing I should also mention that I find really interesting from an academic standpoint is that financial infidelity proneness is correlated with a lot of different things, including psychological entitlement, narcissism, kind of like those Machiavellian traits.
sure.
And so the person who's doing the talking, like let's assume that maybe they could have more of that psychological entitlement and like feel like I don't have to tell my partner what I'm doing. It's my money. So I think those sorts of attitudes make kind of ripe for these grounds or these dynamics to happen. Another big one is separate bank accounts. And I say that cautiously because just because you have separate bank accounts does not mean you're engaging in financial infidelity or that there's any sort of asymmetry. But what it does is it provides an opportunity to make concealment easier. And so if partners are not on the same page, that could then be, being played out through separate bank accounts.
Yeah, the separate bank accounts is something that has come up as more of a question, like should we or should we not? And I feel very similar in that just because you have separate accounts does not mean that there is, but there is an extra layer of work and effort that needs to be put in to have that transparency there. And so that extra hurdle, if you will, you know, some couples are willing to rise to the challenge and some are just not. And that can create just some difficulty there, and set couples up for financial infidelity there. So, okay, here is and I'm not asking you to like case consult or play therapist here, but this is something common that I hear and see, and have had advisors even ask on in terms of how to handle for business owners. You're working with a couple, one or maybe both partners, but one partner is a business owner.
Okay. Yes.
There is this like, I don't want to say entitlement. I don't want to say confusion. I don't want to say whatever it is, but there is this thought that, well, but this is the business and these expenses, these purchases, or the financial decision making in the business, like my partner is not a part of. And if I want to run something through the business, like I don't have to tell then my partner. The flip side of that, right? The partner, how much are we making? And what is that? I didn't know that you were doing that or purchasing that thing. And I hear it's for the business, but the business also impacts our personal life.
Right.
And couldn't we be drawing more from the business if you weren't doing that? Like there's just this really messy place, I think, for couples where one or both partners are business owners. And from my experience, this is where I see a lot of financial infidelity occurring. I'm curious your thoughts. I'm curious if there is any research, maybe there or looked at or what you guys have observed through your research as it relates to couples where maybe one or both partners is a business owner.
So, like, I'm smiling as you're talking about this because I have a very close example of this to my heart, and I hope they're not listening. But I have heard this exact
We're
scenario.
just gonna bar everyone, Jenny, that like you like I'm just gonna make a list of all the people that like you don't want to listen to. We'll just make
You're
sure
like,
that
we're
they
just
yeah.
gonna screen them out. No.
Yep. Yeah.
So anecdotally, yes, I've heard this example before. People have written this in, like when we do surveys and things and we ask couples, this comes up a lot where I have a business. I have to maintain separate accounts for tax purposes and all these different reasons. And then the other partner feels really frustrated by this because they feel like, the business owner partner is, making all these secretive decisions with. And I'm here to validate those feelings. Like you said, I can play therapist a little bit. I think those feelings are super valid. I think the way that I would approach that is I do think there are economic reasons why you may have to maintain some separation, right? Like you're separating business finances from, personal finances, so to speak. But that said, I really think it requires those conversations. Like you need to be on the same page because if one partner is feeling like the other is making decisions, it sounds like there needs to be a conversation. We need to get on the same page. The business owner can say, look, I have to maintain these accounts for these purposes. This is important. And maybe they feel that they don't need to run every specific business decision by them. But I would argue that if it involves the couple's finances, then it does warrant the conversation. Because as I'm sure you've heard before, like money is not just money, right? It's power, it's control, it's all of these other things. And it can really trigger a lot of those, inner feelings that we might have. And so I really think in those situations, you need to talk to
Yeah.
avoid the likelihood of concealment and to be engaging in acts that you think will be disapproved of. And just to throw this out there, I have some work in progress where we, not this specific couple scenario, but in general, we find that couples expect talking about money to be much less rewarding than it really is. Well, yes. We have all these, we've done a lot of diary studies where we recruit couples and we have them have a financial conversation. Like, we want you to talk to your partner tonight about money or time or whatever different resources. And then we recruit them back the next day and we say, how did it go? And it turns out it's not so scary. It's not as bad as you think it is. And so I think a lot of these things also, maybe afraid to broach that topic. So if you find yourself in that situation, if your business partner or not, have that conversation because it's not as bad as you think.
Yeah. I cannot wait for that
I
to
will let
come
you know when
out.
that one hits.
Please send me an email. Please let me know. That sounds I Clayton and I find them incredibly rewarding, these conversations, but we're weird. Like we're, I
Self-select.
yeah, right. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate that terminology versus just weird because I'm like, well, we're just weird and we get
No.
a lot of satisfaction. And it's very rewarding, maybe too rewarding to talk about. But I would agree with you. And I think maybe in an advisor's role, kind of in this place, is to gently kind of set the stage for that. And there's a lot of different ways that we could go about doing that, but there are some for gently setting the stage for being able to do that. I was recalling a couple as you were talking there where debt came up and business owner taking on debt without telling the partner, and it was discovered like in a meeting, paying down a loan. And it was what loan? And it was, oh
No.
well, this
Like,
business loan that we had to take. What do you mean you took out another business another business loan? There, now that conversation was not very rewarding, but the partner, who the non-business owner partner, actually kind of through that conversation and after said that she felt better like knowing and talking about it. Her partner was really afraid that his wife would become upset, but also convinced himself that she just didn't really need to know because it was with the business and he doesn't want her freaking out or becoming upset or like worried. He used the word worried, but she was like, well, I feel better like when I do know. Like it is actually, she didn't use the word rewarding, but like it is better. I like knowing. I'm okay like having that conversation. I do want to know.
mhm.
It puts us on the same page and it feels good.
And that's exactly what I was saying with that financial goal alignment. Like once we're on the same page, it feels better. And actually what we find too about like why you think things are going to be worse is because you think there's no closure. Like it's just it's like an ongoing thing that never really settles. But in this case, it sounds like it settled because then that person felt better knowing this information.
Yeah, exactly. And I get where like it's hard to step into the waters of the unknown and like the scary, especially when we have all of our own like kind of money stuff there too, and then we have to navigate our partner's money stuff there, and that can be pretty scary. And I can also see, kind of bringing us back to financial infidelity, it makes a lot of sense then why people hide
Exactly.
purchases or savings or spending. Like it makes a lot of sense from a place of just vulnerability. Or if they don't think that, as your upcoming research is going to show, that financial conversations will be rewarding, like it would just make a lot of sense where concealing purchases or spending where they feel like their partner may be disapproving of, it would make a lot of sense. I'm not saying it's right. but it
For
would make a
sure.
lot of
Yeah, this
sense.
is just these are descriptive findings, right? Like what's right, wrong, like even harm, like the extent to which this harms different couples varies. But like you said, I think it really comes down to that anticipated disapproval, which I think is what drives the concealment, right? Like you said, like the business owner, I'm afraid that she's going to be uncomfortable or upset about this. Like you're worried, which is why you hide it. But then it
Yeah.
comes out, and then it, now it's kind of like when if you suppress emotions too much, and then it comes out, you like blow up. And so like it can lead to bigger issues down the road. So yeah, conversations, transparency. I would also recommend planning the conversations. And I'm sure you've heard this a million times too. Like nobody wants to get this sort of stuff sprung on them. Like in the middle of a meeting, you're like, wait, what? And then it's like blindsided, right? As
Each
opposed to
time.
let's set aside time so that you have time to think through it, prepare thoughts, like even jot down notes, just so that you have everything there, because that's going to feel a lot better because then
Yeah.
there's more control of that situation.
I want to take us back to something that you mentioned earlier around the impact of financial infidelity, asymmetry, and that is on a couple's satisfaction and well being. Now, I know you talked a little bit about just kind of numbers, like having less assets. But can we maybe talk a little bit about your findings? Were there anything specific around well being or satisfaction, like in particular areas? Or was it just maybe more general well being and satisfaction were?
Yeah, so we focus specifically on relationship satisfaction. So, how happy are you within your marriage? Like, is this a good partnership? Is this a good union? Those sorts of metrics. And then for financial well being, we really focused on a subjective sense of well being. So, the extent to which you are happy with how open you are with your partner. How happy are you with the amount that you're saving? How happy are you talking about money? So, kind of more of a generalized, we're doing well here. And then with assets, that was the more objective measure. So we had bank account data from mo- a couple's money mobile management app. It's a mouthful. I'm not sure if I'm saying that, but
Gosh,
it's
that
an
is
app.
also a mouthful.
Yes, it's a mobile app designed to help couples manage their finances together. And we looked at, each partner's propensity to hide accounts, because it's awesome. This platform actually allows you to, well, I shouldn't say awesome, but from a research standpoint, you can choose transparency settings, how much they're hiding from partners. Then we correlated that with their actual assets. And so the more discrepant you are, you save less money together. And it goes back to that point of like, you're just not having unified goals.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, and so some of the well-being parts of that on the subjective side. Yeah,
Yes.
was there anything that I guess that surprised you with that? I know that you've done a lot of research kind of just in this area, but was there anything that surprised you or stood out?
I think the thing that surprised me the most is just how open people are about it. Like a lot of people, and I always say this with when I study couples, I'm always shocked at how forthcoming people are. Like I find that couples want to participate in this sort of research because it's a nice opportunity for self reflection, right? It's like, I'm doing this thing. So like we actually developed an instrument. So if listeners are interested in seeing this, where you can gauge people's level of financial infidelity proneness and just how people are willing to acknowledge it. The other thing that I will say that is kind of an important caveat to all of this work is that we in our data do not observe couples that are both really high in this quality. So a lot of our assessment is we're really looking at people where they're both very aligned on the low end, like we're not doing this, to couples where there's a bit more divergence. So in our own data, I think the people that are maybe really struggling with this are not willing to participate in this sort of work. And
Makes
so
sense.
from a financial advising perspective, I would love to hear more about, because I'm sure people have seen clients like this where there's a really high level of this, discrepant, like we are both raging financial infidelity people, right? And I think it could be going back to the self selection. I don't think those unions make it.
Yeah.
They do.
Yeah.
There's a lot of important dynamics there. But I think that actually that is one of the more surprising things is we don't observe those couples, but I think they're more clinical couples, right? Like they're struggling. There could be other things going on, but yeah. So I think those are the two things that kind of surprised me the most.
Well, for those of you listening, if you have any of the couples where both of them are high on the, prone to financial infidelity, send them Jenny's way,
Yes.
is what
Send
I'm
them
hearing.
away. I want to
Send
study that.
them. So, yeah, so she can and put out some really great research, and findings. But that makes a lot of sense. Just, I think that scale one is super interesting. I would love to take a look at it myself. And I'm wondering too, just like from a takeaway standpoint for advisors, you shared that how willing couples are at being open or talking about some of this. And so I'm just wondering from like an opportunity place, like, you know, is this something that advisors can ask about in their work if they get kind of a spidey sense? If so, like how might, or are there like one or two questions maybe that you think would be just a good starting place in asking for advisors?
Yes, I think from a financial advising standpoint, I think you should ask about financial infidelity behaviors. I would just my gut reaction says not to use the word infidelity because I think that sets people, wait, what? I'm not cheating on my partner because like you were saying, it's not just sexual infidelity, there's emotional, but we're looking at the financial piece. So I think focusing on the behaviors, like, do you ever spend more than maybe your partner knows about? Like, because then it takes the judgment off the person and it's more about the behavior. I think it's also focusing on the couple. Like, this is our behavior, our dynamic, as opposed to pointing fingers. So, like, you don't want to call out one of the partners. I think it's more about like, so as a couple, how do you talk about money? Kind of those broader, more open ended. And then I would also pay attention not to just what's said, but also nonverbal cues. Is one partner kind of like getting real shifty eyed and kind of looking away or blushing or getting uncomfortable? That tells you something, right? And I'm sure you've seen your kind of smile.
Or they do like the very overt, like head turn and like look
But
right
yes,
at the
that
other.
accusation, like,
They're not saying it, but the speed and intensity at which the head turns is
I
very
love
telling.
that. I wonder if I can calibrate that in the lab. But yeah, just kind of asking those broader questions about, tell me more about how you talk about money. Tell me about, how are you feeling about your spending these days? Kind of these broader questions that aren't pointed at one person because then they're going to go on the defensive and just kind of shut down. And so I always, and again, my financial advisor father-in-law always brought this up about how it's therapy in some ways, right? Like you have to not only manage the economic resources in front of you, but the interpersonal dynamic and the couple. And like they're going to leave that meeting with the information that was just discussed. And so like they have a life outside of that office. And so that's something to kind of keep in mind about kind of asking broader questions and maybe avoiding the term infidelity, because I think that could kind of set people.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I echo that in terms of not using that word infidelity. And I love what you said as far as focusing on the behaviors, like
Right.
asking questions that address the behaviors, not, do you engage in financial infidelity?
Yeah. Do you lie to your partner?
Do you lie? Do you conceal and lie to your partner?
Exactly.
Maybe you would get some people who are honest, but I think,
And that's why we developed the scale to be about behavioral type things, because we knew, because it's a self-report thing, people aren't going to want to say, yeah, I lie to my partner all the time, right? It's more about, here's this behavior. Does this ever come up?
yeah. Yeah, I love that. I think that's what a great resource. So I appreciate you offering that. As we are wrapping up, Jenny, is there anything else like around just this research on financial infidelity or financial infidelity asymmetry that you feel like is important for advisors to know about, maybe that we didn't touch on or get to today?
I think we've talked about a lot of the dynamics itself, but I think it's also important just to recognize that this is really common. Like in our own data, I mean, we're seeing like 30% of couples are acknowledging it in their relationship. And that is just the people who are willing to acknowledge it. So it's actually higher. And so I think this is a much more common thing. But like you said, it can be a bit taboo, it can be a bit uncomfortable. But I think it's important to recognize that this could be in the backdrop, in the background. People might use different words. Another word that I've seen, I think in the Wall Street Journal, is like stealth shopping. And like, so all these different, again, behaviors that would fall under this umbrella. But I think it's just important to recognize that it's more common than you realize. And I think people might be struggling with it. And if they are struggling it, and they're not sharing the full picture with their partner, they're probably not sharing the full picture with you as an advisor. And so to kind of try to get at that can really help, kind of improve outcomes on both sides.
Yeah, I love that. I think that that's a great point, and I'm glad that you shared just statistically how prevalent,
Mhm.
at least from what we know, but also what we don't know, but
Exactly.
could assume there. Well, thank you, Jenny, for coming on and sharing all of your wisdom and insights around this topic. If people are listening and interested in learning more about you, learning more about your work, could you share with us where they can find you, where they can connect with you?
Yes. So my personal website is jennyginolson.com. So yes, my middle name is Gin after my Aunt Ginger, not the liquor. And so jennyginolson.com. I have links to different papers there. I have my contact information. If people, want to connect, feel free to email me and I'd love to chat.
Awesome. Wonderful. We'll make sure that we include that in the show notes so that you can easily connect with Jenny Jen.
I'm
I
Jen.
love that. I love that. And thank you to all of you for tuning in today and allowing Jenny and I into your ears and into your mind. If this conversation resonated with you, I'd love to keep the connection going. You can find me on LinkedIn at Ashley Kwame, where I share weekly insights on the human side of planning. And if you want even more planning and beyond, if you want even more Ashley Kwame, that might be kind of dangerous. I'm not sure. You can head over to the website, www.beyondthefp.com, where we put out a monthly newsletter for all of those who are subscribed. Make sure to follow the show so that you never miss any future conversations like this one. And as always, finances don't have feelings, but your clients do. Until next time, keep planning, keep growing, and keep going beyond.